Hello and welcome to another tutorial video. This episode is about the DRONE38 and the DronX drone modules from the AE Modular system from Tangible Waves. You just heard a little patch that I made that only used those two drone modules being patched together in the mixer. And what I was showing in that patch was that the mixer actually adds a lot to the character of the drones. And these modules are really tied together at the hip and together produce the full drone experience. Let's go to the details of how these drone modules work. So first we look at the DRONE38 module. This module has 6 banks of 3 oscillators. So you have them in rows, 3 rows, A, B, and C. Each row has 2 banks of 3 oscillators each. And you can select the level of each row with a volume knob at the bottom here if you're using the output. You can also switch different banks on and off. So with these switches at the bottom here, you can switch each individual bank on or off of either the sum output or the output. If a bank is switched off, you can momentarily switch it on by pressing the button here. So if you would have all of them switched off and they would be tuned to different pitches, then you could play them by pressing those buttons. On my version of the drone module, there is still a printing error. So probably the first batch or first 2 batches of this module have this error. It says here that you can switch the row A and B oscillators from sawtooth to triangle, but that is incorrect. Actually, you can switch the B and C rows to a triangle wave. The A row is always a sawtooth wave. The outputs are, you have a total mix output from the module. So that takes into account the switches for the individual banks and the levels per row. You also have an output for each row, and that output is the full volume without looking at this knob, but it does honor the off switches. So if you have one of these 2 banks switched off, then there would be no sound coming out of the sum A output. You also have a pulse output here at the top. That's called pulse out, which is labeled B1 to B6. And if the B oscillator is switched to a sawtooth wave, you have a kind of a pulse output that can be used to synchronize this row of oscillators with the A oscillators by patching from here to the A1 sync inputs. If the B oscillator is switched on a triangle wave, you actually get gates, which is really nice. So if you use that, you can actually get real pulse waves out of it, which you can use in other applications later on. So this module, in a way, although there's a lot of things going on here with the knobs and switches, is very simple. You have 18 individual oscillators, 3 of which are always in one bank, and 6 of them form one level controlled row, which goes into the output. So what you heard in the patch before was different types of oscillators use the sawtooth wave and the triangle wave outputs. And in the very beginning, you could hear a very silent or low sound, which was on this level here, level B, this row on this second drone here, which is switched to a triangle wave. And you could hear that there wasn't much oomph in that voice. It was very, very thin. And this is where the DronX mixer comes in. In the very first few seconds of the patch, I was able to thicken this sound, this triangle wave sound, by adding the bass and treble tone controls, adding distortion, which is basically a wave folder, and then switching on the delay effect. And the delay really adds to the character of the sound and takes the individual pulses that are in the inconsistency of the pitches of the 6 different oscillators and makes it a really thick sound. Then I patched it all into the multi-FX and with some reverb, And that really then gave it a big wall of sound, especially once I added the row C here, which, as you can see, is almost exactly pitched the same way as row B, but just so slightly different because it's almost impossible to patch it to select the pitches correctly. So there's some wave inconsistency there that really makes that sound really thick and full. And this is where we come to the DronX mixer. The DronX mixer is a very simple mixing module. It has on the left-hand side 6 inputs for audio inputs, for audio signals in 1 to 6, and has a CV control input for the time 1 and time 2 parameters of the delay section of the unit. There is only a single output, which is from the mix of all the voices mixed together, and the other patch points are multiples. You have some insert effects controls, so you could send the output to a effect 1 unit, get the return of that, and then send another output to a second effect unit and get the return of that in. And the way this works is that the signal path is from left to right. First, all the mixed voices go into the bass and treble tone section. Then they go into the effect 1, unless it's bypassed. Then the return of that goes into the distortion unit. Then the output of the distortion unit gets sent to the second effect. The second effect goes into the delay section, and the output of the delay is then going to the output point here. With these effects, you have no control over the dry or wet, so you would have to do this on the module or using external attenuators for that. You just get the full signal back, and then you have to deal with that. The delay section is really nice. It has 9 different programs. It ranges from single shots to dual chain delays, dual parallel delays, and really glitchy delays that you can play with. And the last 3 delay algorithms use the LFO button here to control an LFO or even a random selection of time parameters for the delays, which adds to the glitchiness of things. So using the delay with a very simple drone sound can really create very interesting sound tapestries. And I urge you to experiment with those different programs. It will actually take much too long for me to go into details of that. But you can switch the programs with these plus and minus buttons. So now I switched on channel delay algorithm number 2, 4. I just want to quickly show my favorite of them all, which is number 9, which is really, really glitchy. So I just dial in a sound here like this. So it's really, really wonky, but look what happens when I turn the time to 0. Good fun. So this is just the number 9, where Robert has programmed it actually in a way that if you turn it to 0, then you somehow completely abuse that delay chip that is in there, and that causes that glitchy effect. So these modules together create the wall of sound. And what I found was that using them in a musical context is both very simple, because everything sounds really fat when you put it through the mixer, but it also quite frustratingly hard to get a good pitched sound. So if you've ever tried to put 2 oscillators in the same pitch, you would appreciate that getting even 3 in the same pitch is hard, but try to get 6 of them in a row in line. It is actually quite hard, and I just quickly demonstrate to you what that feels like. So I just turn on oscillator row A here. Well, I think I didn't do too bad of a job, but also you can see that actually I have switched off the second bank. So if I turn this on, you can hear that it's quite noisy. So even though those three oscillators here in this second bank are pointing in the same direction, and it is just the sawtooth, if it's just slightly out of sync, creates this noise, a very, very noisy sound, and it's quite hard to get them all in sync. So I think I just managed it. And the way I found it easiest is to switch off the second bank and just start tuning the first three oscillators, and then switching on the second bank and trying to get these three in line with those. If you start with all six, it will be almost impossible. What I also found was that getting a sawtooth bank of oscillators in tune or in the same pitch is harder than using the triangle waves. So on a triangle wave oscillator, you actually have, because you don't have those noisy overtones, it's much easier to get those in line, I found. But the downside is that the triangle wave is very low and thin to start with. As you can see here, there's not much going on until you actually switch in the distortion and the delay. And then you can get a bigger sound. So these are the drone modules and the DronX mixer module. I hope you enjoyed the patch I gave in the beginning, and that you will just experiment with them. So here I had different types of pitches put in. I also found that if you put them quite far apart in terms of pitch, they actually work well together, like these three banks here. So if you listen to those, for instance, that's bank A, and that works quite well with bank B. Especially if I add a little bit of reverb. And they also work well with bank C, which is a much higher pitch. But some combinations, especially if you use the distortion circuit, you're producing a lot of noise. So for instance, if I would switch on the B and C channels now, and then I put in a sawtooth like the A bank, you can hear a lot of noise. Whereas if I put on A by itself, not quite as noisy. Also this bank here, bank C. If I put bank C on together with those two, very distorted. But if I put it on by itself, it's actually quite nice sound. Same with level B here. So what's going on here? You have this very clean sound, and this is quite a clean sound, but they're both together produce some crazy interference. So these are the things that you would deal with by using these modules, and it can be exactly what you're looking for, or it can be frustrating, or it can be a fantastic journey to get the sound just so that it just works. So this was the overview of the Drone38 and the DronX mixer modules with my little patch at the beginning. I hope you enjoyed that, and I wish you a lot of fun with these modules. And as always, keep patching and post your patches and your music on the forum and on YouTube, and let us hear what you come up with. Thank you very much for watching.